Episode 2, The Law of the Pack. In the stillness of the frozen dawn, long before the sun reached the treetops, the forest held its breath. Then came the first sound, a low, deliberate crunch of snow. Then another, then a dozen more. The pack was moving. From a distance, they looked like shadows rippling across the white earth, swift, silent, and synchronized. But to those who knew, this was more than movement. This was order. This was law. Because for the direwolf, survival was never just about strength. It was about structure, rules, purpose, and trust. At the core of every direwolf pack was a code as old as ice and bone, unwritten, untaught, yet known, deeply, by every member. The law of the pack. It began with the alpha. Not a tyrant, but a balance of wisdom and power. A male and female, side by side. They were not chosen by force, but by proof of endurance, of patience, of care. An alpha led the hunt, not just with teeth, but with timing. An alpha defended not just territory, but peace within. They knew when to fight and when to turn, when to push forward, and when to circle back for the limping pup. But alphas were nothing without the others. In a direwolf pack, every role mattered. The hunters, the guards, the mothers, the teachers, even the wanderers who returned home in their final seasons. There was no idle mouth. Even the smallest pup was watched over, groomed, guided. When a pup cried, 6 wolves answered. The pack was not just family by blood, it was family by bond. New mates were not chosen in chaos. Courting was quiet, respectful, and patient. 2 wolves would travel beside each other for days, sometimes seasons, learning one another's rhythm before choosing a future. And when a pair was formed, the pack adjusted. New space was made, tensions eased, the balance remained. Food was shared, not stolen. If a hunt failed, all failed together. If a hunt succeeded, the young ate first. In this wild world, where death was always near, the direwolf chose order. Not just because it worked, but because it honored life. They did not hoard, they did not betray, they did not abandon. And in those rare moments when a pack split, when new alphas rose or old ones fell, it was done with ritual. A glance, a bowed head, a final howl. There was pain, yes, but not hatred. Because even in parting, the law stood. Outsiders who approached were not welcomed easily. The pack was cautious. They circled, they watched, they sniffed, not just for scent, but for truth. Only those who moved with respect, who did not challenge but contributed, could hope to stay. And when conflict came, as it always does, it was swift. A warning growl, a stiff tail. If ignored, a clash. But fights were short. Not because the direwolf was weak, but because it didn't fight to destroy. It fought to remind the young who was still learning. To remind the bold what the law was. To remind the pack that unity must never break. The trials of unity. Unity is not a gift. It is earned day by day, trial by trial. And for the direwolf, no bond was taken for granted. Seasons changed swiftly in their world. A lush summer could become a starving winter in days. Floods, fires, rival packs, collapsing herds, all could shatter the fragile thread of harmony. And yet, they held. Because the law of the pack was not just practiced in calm, it was tested in crisis. There was a year they still remembered. A year of too much rain. Prey scattered. Dens flooded. Pups lost to the cold. One pack 16 strong found themselves trapped between rising rivers and empty fields. Their youngest couldn't walk. The elders had no strength left to swim. And so, they did what the law demanded. They didn't leave the weak behind. They carried them. One by one, through water and mud, they returned for each other. Not once, not twice, but until every life was counted. That year, they lost 3, but saved 13. Not because of chance, but because the pack moved as one. Another test came in the form of another pack. Not enemies, not friends, just another group, hungry, desperate, and moving through shared territory. Tension rose like smoke. Both packs knew the law. 2 alphas cannot lead in one place. They circled, watched, waited, but this time, neither side chose violence. Instead, the younger alpha submitted not in weakness, but in strategy. They waited, shared space, then peeled off at dawn to find new ground. Not all trials were of fang and frost. Some were silent, Like when an alpha grew old, too old to hunt, to lead, to walk. There was no ceremony, no burial, but the pack knew. They walked slower, howled, softer. When the final night came, the old leader lay down under a tree he'd known since youth, and the entire pack stayed with him all night, their bodies wrapped around his in a circle of breath and warmth. When he passed, they didn't move for hours, and when they finally rose, they howled, not in grief, but in remembrance. The next morning, a new alpha stepped forward, not loud, not proud, but ready, because leadership in the direwolf world was not inherited. It was earned in silence, in storms, in sacrifice. Even love was a trial. Courtship wasn't fast. It was made of shared kills, shared watches, shared walks under the moon. One young pair, the story goes, waited nearly a year to bond. They were opposites. She was bold, he was calm. She ran ahead, he circled behind. At first, they clashed, but instead of separating, they learned. And when the bond finally formed, it was unbreakable. They led hunts together, raised pups together, and when one was injured in a fall, the other stopped eating until the wound healed. That was the law too, to love, not just fiercely, but faithfully. Not every direwolf passed the trials. Some broke, some ran, some fought against the order, tried to challenge the law, and those few, those rare few, were exiled, not in cruelty, but in sadness. The sacred chain. The forest, for all its silence, was alive with memory. Each paw print, pressed into the dirt, was a page. Each howl a song carried from one soul to another. And through it all ran a golden thread, the sacred chain of the pack. This chain was not forged in fire, but in time. Not bound by blood alone, but by sacrifice, loyalty, and rhythm. It was the invisible link that held the direwolves together, from the tiniest pup to the eldest hunter. It began at birth. The pups were born blind, helpless, and warm, wriggling in the safety of a dugout den, surrounded by the scent of fur and earth. But they were never alone. Even before their eyes opened, the pack stood watch. The mother nursed, the father hunted, and the rest? They circled, they cleaned, they taught. Lessons didn't come with words. They came with nudges, growls, and example. The pups would mimic, the pack would correct. One tugged too hard on the sibling's ear, and the elder would growl softly, not to punish, but to guide. As they grew, they learned to walk, to chase, to listen, but above all, to belong. They knew who they were by who surrounded them. The sacred chain taught them when to follow, when to lead, and when to hold still and trust. And it never broke. Not across seasons, not across generations. When a hunter fell in a chase, others carried the kill back. When an elder collapsed from age, they were guarded wolves sleeping beside them until their last breath. And when a pup wandered too far, even in anger, the pack never stopped searching. That was the chain. It connected them in every act, every howl, every silence, even across death. Because direwolves did not forget. Each howl at dusk carried memory, not just location or warning, but love. They howled to remember the fallen, to guide the lost, to teach the young what came before. There were places where packs would return each year, not for food, not for shelter, but because something sacred happened there long ago. A birth, a farewell, a moment of triumph. They would walk in circles, sniffing at the same stones, resting under the same tree, as if to say, we were here, we still are. And when a new pup played in that place, the circle was complete. It was the past reaching forward, the chain renewing itself. Even wolves, who left lone wanderers, driven by instinct or exile, carried the chain within them. Some would howl alone into the cold, waiting for a reply. Some would find new packs, new laws, but they always knew. Somewhere, a chain had once held them, and some returned older, scarred, slower. And if the pack still remembered their scent, their voice, their effort, they were welcomed. Not always with joy, but with acceptance. because to break the chain entirely, that was death beyond death. The greatest fear of a direwolf was not pain or hunger. It was to be forgotten, but the law would not allow it. Each new generation bore the echoes of the one before. The sacred bond of the direwolf could not be broken. Ephus,